Welcome to the WWII machine. Beyond the bullets and the bayonets, there was a mechanical heart that fueled the greatest conflict in history. Today, we look at the gears that turned the tide. September 12, 1944. A damp, grey morning at a command bunker near Koblenz, Germany. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt stands by a narrow slit in the concrete, the collar of his grey coat turned up against the biting chill of the Rhineland. He is a man of the old Prussian school, stiff, aristocratic, and weary. Beside him, a map of the Western Front is spread across a heavy oak table, but it is a map of ghosts. He traces a finger along the seam, then toward the seed-fried line. Behind his eyes, he isn't seeing troop movements. He is calculating the weight of grain and the strength of a horse's leg. The silence of the bunker is broken by the rhythmic clop of hooves outside. You look out with him to see a column of the 7th Army retreating eastward. It is a sight that would have been familiar to Napoleon. There are no roaring engines here. Instead, tired, but ached infantrymen lead heavy wooden carts pulled by straining draft horses. The animals' ribs show through their hides. Their breath comes in ragged plumes of steam. Every few hundred yards, a cart stalls, its axle snapped by the cratered roads, and the soldiers simply heave the precious crates of Mauser ammunition into the ditch to keep the column moving. Where are the trucks? Rundstedt's voice is a low rasp. His adjutant, a nervous major, doesn't answer immediately. They both know the answer. The Luftwaffe's fuel reserves are dry, and the few Opel Blitz trucks they have left are burning synthetic fuel that gums up the engines, or they are sitting abandoned in the hedgerows of Normandy because a single fan belt couldn't be delivered from a factory in Essen. Rundstedt looks back at the map. He knows his history. He knows that an army marches on its stomach, that in 1944 it breathes on gasoline. He has been told by Berlin that the Americans are overextended. He has been told that their amateur supply lines must surely be snapping under the weight of the push toward the Rhine. He wants to believe it. He needs to believe that the Atlantic Ocean is a barrier the Americans cannot overcome. But then, a courier enters. He isn't carrying a tactical report of a skirmish. He is carrying a leather satchel recovered from a captured American jeep near Chartres. Inside is a set of laminated documents and a series of circular, red, stamped route maps. As Rundstedt unfolds the first sheet, he expects to see a chaotic scramble of a retreating foe. Instead, he sees a circle, a red ball, and a logistical artery so sophisticated it makes his Prussian heart skip a beat. September 15, 1944, 14:00 hours. A dusty, high-speed transit corridor outside France. You are standing on the shoulder of a road that has been stripped of civilian life and turned into a singular, pulsing machine. The air doesn't just smell of diesel, it tastes like it thick, gritty, and hot. To your left, a massive red circle is painted onto a wooden signpost, the Red Bull route. And then, you hear it. It isn't the sporadic rumble of a few trucks. It is a continuous, subterranean roar that vibrates through the soles of your boots before the vehicles even appear. Suddenly, the first Gimsik 2.5-ton deuce and a half rounds the bend, its engines screaming at 50 miles per hour. Then another, then 5 more, then 50. They are spaced exactly 60 yards apart, a relentless mechanical tide surging toward the front. The drivers are slumped over their steering wheels, their eyes bloodshot and rimmed with white dust, some having been behind the wheel for 18 hours straight. Many are African-American soldiers from the Quartermaster Corps, men who were told they weren't fit for combat, yet here they are, piloting the very lifeblood of the Allied invasion through the heart of France. You look into the back of a passing truck. It isn't just crates of rations. It's a mountain of jerry cans, 5-gallon steel containers filled with high-octane gasoline, stacked to the canvas roof. Behind that truck is another loaded entirely with 105mm artillery shells. Behind that, a reefer truck carrying frozen beef. This is the conveyor belt that the German High Command insisted was impossible. To ensure this flow never stops, the Americans have turned the roads into one-way loops. If a truck breaks down, it isn't towed. It is shoved into the ditch by a bulldozer to keep the path clear. Specialized wreckers prowl the route like sharks, leaping on mechanical failures within minutes. Every few miles, gas and water points appear like mirages, staffed by mechanics who swap tires and refill tanks, while the drivers barely have time to light a cigarette. Back in the quiet of the Koblenz bunker, Rundstedt is staring at the captured documents that describe this madness. He sees a logistical map that doesn't just show where the trucks are, it shows a scheduled 24-hour-per-day cycle. The Americans aren't just driving trucks, they are operating a factory that spans from the docks of Cherbourg to the very edge of the Siegfried Line. The field marshal's eyes fixate on a specific detail in the reported tally of the tonnage delivered in a single day. He compares it to the meager capacity of his horse-drawn carts struggling through the mud outside. The math is cold. The math is cruel. And as he traces the Red Bull route with a trembling finger, the aristocratic mask begins to slip. September 16, 1944. 1945 hours. Inside the dimly lit map room of a Commando West, the room smells of stale tobacco and the ozone of a dying radio set. Field Marshal von Rundstedt leans over the oak table, his monocle catching the flicker of a single lamp. Before him lies the Black Book of Captured Allied Logistics, a document his intelligence officers had initially dismissed as American propaganda. But the reality is staring him in the face in the form of a captured Red Bull transit schedule and a series of topographical overlays. You watch as his eyes scan the columns of data. 12 tons. That is the number. In a single day, the Americans have moved 12 tons of supplies from the coast to the front. He looks at his own supply reports, handwritten scrawls on scrap paper. His 7th Army is pleading for 300 tons of ammunition just to hold a single sector for 48 hours. The discrepancy isn't a gap, it is a canyon. They are not just moving supplies. Rundstedt mutters to the shadows of the room. They are moving an entire civilization. He turns to a large-scale map of the Atlantic. His finger traces the line from the ports of New York and Norfolk across 3,000 miles of U-boat-infested water through the artificial mulberry harbors of Normandy and onto the Red Bull highways. It is a logistical chain that defies every Prussian military action. In his world, an army's reach is dictated by the endurance of a horse and the proximity of a railhead. If the rails are blown, the army starves. But the Americans. He sees notes on portable pipelines and fabricated bridges. He reads a report of a Bailey Bridge erected in under 6 hours over a river his engineers swore would take a week to span. The realization begins to set in: the Americans haven't just outfought his generals, they have out-calculated them. They have treated the liberation of Europe like a massive construction project, and their currency is an endless supply of steel and oil. A junior officer enters, licking his heels. Field Marshal, the Führer demands a counter. Offensive. He insists the Americans are at the end of their rope and will collapse if we strike their center. Rundstedt doesn't look up from the map. He looks at the Red Bull route again, a circular, never-ending loop of mechanized power. He knows that for every American tank he destroys, 10 more are already being craned off a ship in Cherbourg. He knows that while his men are scavenging for shoes, the Americans are eating hot turkey dinners in the mud. He feels the weight of the industrial world pressing down on his chest. September 18, 1944. 4:30 hours. A forward observation post overlooking the Meuse River Valley. The dawn is a bruised purple, and you are standing beside Rundstedt as he lowers his Zeiss binoculars. The air is deceptively still, but from the west, a low, persistent hum begins to vibrate in the ground, a sound like a swarm of angry hornets. It isn't the scream of Stukas or the whistle of shells. It is the synchronized roar of thousands of internal combustion engines. Rundstedt looks down at his own boots. coated in the thick, grey clay of the Ardennes. He thinks of his soldiers, men of the 12th Panzer Division, who are currently siphoning fuel from civilian cars and even crashed aircraft just to move their Tigers 5 kilometers. He looks at a nearby artillery battery. The guns are silent because the horse-drawn caissons carrying the shells are stuck in a mud-filled crater 10 miles to the rear. There, he looks back toward the American lines. Through the thinning mist, the first headlights of the Red Ball Express flicker like a malevolent string of pearls. They don't turn off their lights. They don't hide. They drive with a terrifying, arrogant confidence, shielded by a canopy of Allied fighters that own the sky. It is not a war of maneuvers anymore, Rundstedt says, his voice barely a whisper to the major standing stiffly behind him. It is a war of mathematics, and we are at zero. He realizes then that every tactical genius in the Wehrmacht, every Tiger tank, and every V-2 rocket is irrelevant. The impossible trick of the Americans wasn't a secret weapon or a brilliant flank. It was the sheer, vulgar abundance of everything. He sees the map in his mind one last time: the red circles, the one-way roads, the 6-0 trucks moving 400 gallons of fuel every single day. The field marshal turns away from the front and walks back toward his staff car, an aging horse that he knows will soon run out of petrol. He knows the Ardennes offensive, the watch on the Rhine, the final gamble. It is all a fantasy. As the sun finally breaks over the horizon, illuminating the endless column of American steel stretching all the way back to the Atlantic, Gerd von Rundstedt finally accepts the truth he saw on the captured map. Germany isn't just being outfought. It is being erased by a logistical machine that never sleeps, never stops, and never runs out. The war is over. The rest is merely the counting of the dead.